My neighbor intends to take my home. This was the thought that crossed my mind as I discovered the orange violation notice fastened to the door of my workshop at 6 in the morning. The harsh sound of metal hitting wood was still ringing in my ears. In my hands, my coffee was getting cold. I read that I had 72 hours to sell or be subjected to daily fines of $500. My transgression was parking my pickup truck in my own driveway, something I had done for 15 years. The scent of sawdust and motor oil wafted from my workshop, the very place where my late wife Sarah and I had brought everything from lawnmowers to memories back to life. Now, some HOA president armed with a god complex and a measuring tape was demanding it be gone. Let me conjure an image of Riverside Meadows as it was around 2010. The aroma of barbecue smoke filled the Saturday evening air, the sound of children's laughter bounced off modest ranch-style houses, and the quiet drone of Mrs. Patterson's old mower, which I had repaired 3 times, was a familiar sound. It was a neighborhood where residents knew each other by name and would borrow a cup of sugar without needing to sign liability forms. I am Dex Brennan, 52 years old, with hands that are permanently stained and a stubborn disposition that makes mules seem accommodating. I purchased this house back when teachers and mechanics could still grasp the American dream. Sarah, my deceased wife, was the one who proposed I turn the garage into a dedicated workshop. "You are going to make me lose my mind rebuilding carburetors on my kitchen table," she had declared, nudging me away from an especially greasy engine component. The workshop evolved into Brennan's small engine repair, a place where I fixed items others had discarded and charged prices my neighbors could manage. 3 years ago, I lost Sarah to cancer. The workshop transformed into my refuge, still holding her gardening gloves on their hook and her seed packets sorted by season in mason jars. Some mornings, the fragrance of her lavender soap would linger, blending with the smells of sawdust and motor oil. Then, the character of the neighborhood began to shift. Enormous, ostentatious houses, or McMansions, appeared as if they were mushrooms after a downpour, each larger and more generic than the one before. The families with swing sets and vegetable patches moved out, replaced by corporate transferees with their zero-tolerance mentalities and visions of immaculate suburbia. This is when Vivian Thornfield arrived. Imagine a woman who had dedicated 2 decades to corporate compliance, pursuing infractions with the tenacity of a bloodhound on a rabbit's trail. Vivian took up residence in the street's most prominent house 18 months ago, a beige monolith to architectural banality that obstructed half of the evening sunset. Within a matter of weeks, she was campaigning for the role of HOA president with the fervor of someone who had discovered their life's purpose. Her campaign materials were masterpieces of passive-aggressive promotion. "Don't let property values decline," they cautioned, displaying before and after pictures where the before image invariably featured pickup trucks and children's playthings. She secured victory by a margin of 3 votes, with only 12 cast in total. That's democracy for you. The harassment began with subtlety. There were polite suggestions concerning my truck's parking spot and casual remarks that my workshop's operating hours were possibly disruptive. I would spot her measuring the height of my lawn with a literal ruler, standing there in her immaculate white sneakers as if she were performing a suburban postmortem. Following that were the city complaints, noise ordinance reports for my Saturday projects, and business licensing inquiries that led nowhere but cost me significant time and paperwork and stress. Every dismissed complaint felt like a minor triumph, yet the conflict was only just starting. One morning at 6 a.m., I found her in my driveway, photographing my truck with the focus of a crime scene investigator. The sound of gravel crunching beneath her designer walking shoes resonated in the quiet of the pre-dawn. "Good morning, Vivian," I called, holding my coffee mug, documenting my terrible offense once more. She didn't bother to look up from her camera. "Just confirming adherence to community standards, Mr. Brennan." "Community standards, indeed," I remarked. I took a drink of coffee, observing her as she positioned herself for the ideal photograph of a small ding on my truck's door. "You know, back in the day, neighbors would simply talk to one another." "These are not the old days," she retorted, her eyes finally meeting mine. "This is a quality neighborhood, and we plan to maintain it as such." A quality neighborhood was her code for no trucks, no small businesses, and no evidence that working people also lived there. The workshop embodied all that I had remaining: Sarah's memory, my autonomy, and 15 years of ties to the community. Surviving on a fixed income meant that every dollar was crucial, and I could not afford to relocate, even if I had the desire to. Beyond that, however, I was resolved not to let some corporate transplant with a measuring tape drive me from the home Sarah and I had created together. Here is what Vivian failed to grasp. I have spent my entire life repairing broken things. Engines, relationships, neighbors' issues, you name it. And at times, the most broken element in a neighborhood isn't a rusty truck or slightly unkempt grass. Sometimes, it's the individual who is determined to fix everyone else. The gloves came off 3 weeks later. I was in the process of rebuilding Tommy Rodriguez's leaf blower when the click of expensive heels on my concrete pad sounded like a countdown. Through the workshop window, I observed Vivian approaching with a clipboard, accompanied by a nervous-looking man in a polo shirt who was carrying professional camera gear. "Mr. Brennan," she declared, her voice filled with the self-assurance of someone who had rehearsed this moment. "I am here with Mr. Davidson from Thornfield Property Management Solutions to carry out a compliance assessment." The scent of motor oil and metal shavings was strong in my nostrils as I put down my wrench. Property Management Solutions. That's a fancy term for being a professional meddler. Davidson was already taking pictures of everything: my truck, my workshop, even the placement of my garbage cans. The fast clicking of his camera was like a swarm of mechanical insects consuming my privacy. "We have identified numerous covenant violations that demand immediate correction," Vivian went on, referencing her clipboard as if she were delivering a medical prognosis. "Unauthorized commercial signage, improper vehicle storage, and the operation of a business in contravention of residential zoning." Commercial signage? I chuckled, which was clearly not the response she had anticipated. "You're referring to the small Brennan's repair sign that has been there for 15 years. Size limitations are explicitly outlined in the revised covenants. No signage larger than 12 square inches is permitted without prior authorization." She presented a hefty folder of papers with the dramatic flair of a magician producing a rabbit from a hat. That's when Mateo Reyes, our neighborhood's 78-year-old retired courthouse clerk, ambled over from his house next door, drawn to the disturbance like a shark to the scent of blood. With his wealth of institutional knowledge, he was the kind of person who could make lawyers nervous. "Afternoon, Dex," Mateo said, his weathered features breaking into a sly smile. "Having a documentation party and didn't invite me?" "Mateo, this is Vivian and her photographer. They're here to measure my sign and take an inventory of my vehicles." Mateo's eyes shone with the mischief of 40 years in bureaucracy. "Revised covenants, you say? How interesting. I assisted in filing the original subdivision documents back in '88. I don't recall any rules about signs." Vivian's grip tightened on her clipboard until her knuckles turned white. "These are updated community standards, which were properly ratified by the Homeowners Association." "Ah," Mateo said with an air of theatrical contemplation. "And when, precisely, was this association established?" "Because I have no memory of a neighborhood vote on any changes to the covenants." The photographer had ceased his clicking and was now examining his camera with the focus of someone plotting an escape. The sweet fragrance of honeysuckle from Mrs. Patterson's fence drifted by, a starkly peaceful contrast to the escalating confrontation. "Mr. Davidson," Vivian commanded sharply, "please continue with your documentation. We have additional violations to evaluate." But Davidson was already putting his equipment away. "Actually, Mrs. Thornfield, I believe I have an adequate number of photos. The legal aspects here seem a bit complex for a routine assessment." I saw him hurry back to his vehicle with the haste of someone who had just spotted a trap. The sound of his engine starting was like a small victory chime. "This is not finished, Brennan," Vivian declared, her professional facade beginning to crumble like old paint. "Our legal team will be in touch with you." "Legal team?" I called out as she walked away. "Is that what you call your husband's internet searches these days?" After she departed, Mateo and I stood there, listening to the distant sounds of a Saturday in the suburbs. Lawnmowers, children laughing, the typical noises of a neighborhood that hadn't forgotten how to live. "You know," Mateo said after a moment, "I still have the original subdivision contracts. I filed them myself back when paperwork held real weight." "Mateo, you magnificent old bureaucrat," I said with a grin. "Feel like helping me take on the powers that be?" That afternoon, We laid out documents on my kitchen table as if we were generals orchestrating a major campaign. The initial subdivision bylaws contained no references to commercial limitations, signage rules, or homeowners associations. Even better, they explicitly permitted small-scale, home-based businesses, provided they didn't generate excessive traffic or noise. "Here's the irrefutable proof," Matteo declared, tapping a yellowed page with his finger. The original developer put in a grandfathering clause. Any business that has been in continuous operation for over 5 years acquires permanent legal standing. With 15 years of operation under my belt, I wasn't just legally compliant. I was protected. It is always wise to request the complete history of covenants, not just the latest versions, as pre-existing rights often take precedence over more recent regulations. The following morning, a certified letter arrived from Thornfield Legal Services. The official-looking paper demanded that I halt all commercial operations within 72 hours or be subject to increasing fines, beginning at $500 a day. I dialed the number on the letterhead. The voicemail message said, "You have reached Harold Thornfield's Business Consulting. Please leave a message, and I will return your call when I am not assisting my wife with her neighborhood improvement initiatives." I burst out laughing and couldn't stop. This wasn't a case of David against Goliath. It was David against a cardboard representation of Goliath, propped up by a woman with a clipboard and an exceptionally tolerant husband. But my laughter ceased when I read the next sentence. "Failure to comply will result in legal action to force the sale of the property." This was now war. Within a matter of days, the harassment intensified into a form of psychological warfare. Vivian's surveillance became a daily morning occurrence. At precisely 6:47 a.m., the sound of her heels clicking across my driveway acted like a metronome, ticking down to my downfall. But it had moved beyond mere photographs. On Tuesday morning, my insurance company called. "We have received information concerning unsafe business practices at your address, Mr. Brennan. We will need to arrange an inspection." Wednesday brought a call from my bank. "There are concerns about undisclosed commercial operations that may affect your home equity line of credit. We must discuss your compliance." On Thursday, it was the IRS. An anonymous party had reported potential unreported business income. The nauseous feeling in my gut blended with the familiar smells of sawdust and motor oil in my workshop. Each phone call was like a blow to the stomach, intended to make me yield to the pressure. However, I had learned a crucial lesson during Sarah's illness. Sometimes, the only way to get through hell is to keep moving forward. "Matteo," I said over coffee, my hand trembling slightly as I held the mug. "She is attempting to ruin me financially." My neighbor's weathered face grew stern. In my 4 decades at the courthouse, I have seen this strategy before. It's systematic harassment aimed at compelling compliance. And, by the way, it is illegal. Legality doesn't seem to count for much when you're receiving calls from the IRS. "Actually," Matteo responded, leaning in with the focus of a man who had spent a lifetime observing bureaucrats, "it matters more than you realize, because every fraudulent report she files is creating a documented trail of harassment." That afternoon, as Vivian carried out her daily photo session, I made a discovery of my own. Harold Thornfield's consulting business was not just operating from their residence. It was a full-fledged enterprise with a steady flow of clients. The converted garage had been transformed into a professional office, complete with a separate entrance, parking, and business signage. The irony was so palpable you could slice it with a rusty tool. "Mr. Brennan," Vivian called out, coming toward me with her measuring tape and clipboard. "I must document the dimensions of your sign for the compliance report." I stepped out, noticing the new tire marks in her driveway from Harold's client meeting that morning. A compliance report? That sounds very official. The city takes covenant violations quite seriously. She was already taking pictures of Sarah's hand-painted sign, the one that stood for 15 years of service to the community and countless cherished memories. "That's interesting," I remarked, taking out my phone, "because I contacted the city yesterday. They informed me that HOAs possess no legal enforcement power. Only the city is authorized to issue actual violations." Her measuring tape paused in midair. "That is false information." "Is it?" "Because I also contacted the state attorney general's office. They have a whole department focused on HOA fraud. It seems that threatening to impose fines without legal backing is a felony." The color vanished from her face as if oil were draining from a cracked engine. We are not imposing fines. We are assessing future penalties. Future penalties for what? For violating rules that don't exist, enforced by an association that isn't real? She gathered her equipment with the agitated motions of someone whose world was beginning to fall apart. You will be hearing from our lawyer. You mean Harold, the one who operates a full-scale consulting firm from your converted garage. If looks had the power to kill, I would have become fertilizer for her immaculate lawn. That evening, Mateo and I took a walk through the neighborhood, counting home-based businesses as if we were taking a census. The sound of autumn leaves crunching under our feet masked our whispered plotting. Davidson Tax Services, 8 years. Mateo indicated a modest ranch house. Mary's Daycare, 10 years. Johnson's Bookkeeping, 5 years. We tallied 9 home-based businesses within a 3-block radius. Piano teachers, dog groomers, graphic designers, and tax preparers. Not a single one had been issued a violation notice. Do you see the trend? Mateo inquired, his courthouse acumen as sharp as ever. I understood it perfectly. Vivian had deliberately targeted 3 individuals: myself, the single mother who ran the daycare, and the elderly veteran who fixed bicycles. All 3 of us owned older vehicles. All 3 catered to working-class customers. All 3 had been residents longer than Vivian. This isn't about property values, I concluded. It's about getting rid of the wrong kind of people. It is crucial to document patterns of selective enforcement, as they can serve as proof of discrimination and may render all HOA actions invalid. The crucial discovery came when I looked up public records online. The Riverside Meadows Homeowners Association had never submitted incorporation documents to the state. It had no legal authority to enforce any rules, collect any funds, or even identify itself as an official entity. Vivian had been orchestrating a complete deception, but her deception was effective. The single mother had already paid $300 in fines she could not afford. The veteran had ceased his bicycle repairs to avoid a confrontation. How many others had been coerced into compliance? My phone rang at 9 p.m. It was Thornfield Legal Services. Mr. Brennan. Harold's voice was strained with fatigue. My wife requested that I contact you regarding your situation. Perhaps we could find a resolution. Harold, your wife is managing an illicit organization and engaging in fraudulent activities. The only resolution I am open to is her immediate resignation and complete reimbursement to everyone she has swindled. There was a long silence. She's not going to be pleased with that. Harold, I am not concerned with what pleases her. This either concludes now, or it concludes in a courtroom. Vivian's reaction to my ultimatum was both swift and personal. On Friday morning, I found new scratches gouged into the paint of my truck. Deliberate marks that crudely spelled out, "Leave." The sound of metal scraping that must have occurred in the night sent a chill down my spine. But the most significant blow arrived with the day's mail. 3 certified letters, all appearing official, all crafted to instill fear. Letter 1 was a notice of a business license suspension investigation from the county. An individual had lodged a formal complaint, accusing me of operating without the required permits. Letter 2 was a property tax reassessment notice, stating that my workshop additions necessitated an urgent structural inspection and could result in tax penalties. Letter 3 was a zoning violation hearing scheduled for Monday morning, demanding my immediate attendance to defend against charges of illegal commercial activity in a residential area. The scent of fresh ink and legal paper permeated my workshop as I examined each document. My hand trembled slightly, not from fear, but from fury at the systematic attempt to ruin my life. Mateo, I called, my voice taut with restrained anger. I need your courthouse knowledge right away. My neighbor arrived in moments, glanced at the letters, and let out a low whistle. Dex, these are professionally produced. Too professional for a counterfeit HOA. What are you suggesting? I'm suggesting that Vivian has influential contacts. Real ones. Someone with access to official letterhead and bureaucratic procedures assisted her in creating these. He examined the documents with the scrutiny of a man who had dedicated decades to uncovering fraud. But here's the catch. Every single one of these can be confirmed with a quick phone call. We began making calls. The county business license office had no record of any complaint or inquiry. The tax assessor's office was closed for the entire week for budget meetings. The zoning department had no hearings scheduled that involved my address. She is escalating to document fraud, Mateo stated grimly. That is a felony. That afternoon, Deputy Martinez came back, not because of a call, but for what she termed a community wellness check. The sound of her boots on my driveway had strangely become a source of comfort. Mr. Brennan, we have received numerous reports concerning your property this week. Noise complaints, business violations, and even an anonymous tip regarding suspicious activity. She appeared weary, like someone who had been handling more neighborhood disputes than actual criminal cases. All from the same source. I cannot reveal that, but I can confirm that we are documenting a pattern of false reports. The district attorney's office is taking an interest in harassment cases, particularly those that involve property disputes. After she departed, I found Vivian waiting near my mailbox. Her customary clipboard had been replaced with a substantial legal folder. The October breeze carried the smell of decaying leaves and her costly perfume, a cloying sweet mixture that made me feel ill. Dex, she began, her voice filled with feigned empathy. I wanted to talk about a resolution before matters become more complicated. Complicated in what way? Well, Harold has been looking into your property's history. Were you aware that Sarah never amended the deed after your marriage? Legally, you may not possess clear title to conduct a business here. The reference to Sarah struck me with the force of a physical impact. What are you referring to? Legal minutiae, errors in paperwork, the sorts of issues that can entangle a property in legal battles for years while court fees accumulate. She offered a smile with the warmth of a predator. Naturally, we could ignore these matters if you were agreeable to relocating of your own accord. Are you threatening my ownership of my own home? I am highlighting potential issues that might emerge if this matter is not settled peacefully. That evening, Mateo came back with a discovery that altered the entire situation. Dex, I've been investigating Vivian's past. She's not merely a compliance officer. She's a property speculator. He laid out documents on my kitchen table. For neighborhoods in 10 years. The same method each time. She moves in, establishes an HOA, singles out particular properties, pressures the owners to leave, and then sells the properties to developers. She's doing this for financial gain. Significant financial gain. The three properties she is focusing on, yours, the daycare, and the veterans' place, are all situated along the creek and are the most desirable lots. Together, they have a development value of over $1 million. The various elements fell into place like a finely tuned engine. She's not attempting to enhance the neighborhood. She's attempting to take it over. It is important to investigate the past activities of property speculators, as recurring patterns of forced sales often point to organized fraudulent schemes. My phone rang at 10 p.m. Vivian's voice was now different, colder, and more calculating. Dex, I attempted to be accommodating, but you are compelling me to resort to more drastic measures. By Monday, you will be confronted with simultaneous legal battles that will cost more to defend than your house is worth. Vivian, you made a single error. You brought up Sarah. What? No one threatens my wife's memory. No one challenges her name on our deed. And no one attempts to steal the home we created together. My voice was as firm as steel. You wanted a conflict? You now have one. I ended the call and immediately phoned Harold. Harold, your wife has just initiated a war with the wrong individual. I trust you are prepared for the repercussions. On Saturday morning, while I was rebuilding a carburetor, Mateo rushed into my workshop as if he were possessed, holding a manila folder and sporting the kind of smile that appears after seeing justice served. Dex, you're going to want to sit down for this. The familiar smells of motor oil and metal filings couldn't hide the palpable excitement in the room. Whatever Mateo had discovered, it was significant. Do you recall Jorge in the courthouse records office? The one who was indebted to me after I helped him steer clear of that pension audit issue. Mateo's hands were trembling as he laid out the documents on my workbench. Well, he conducted some research. The first document struck me like a blow to the solar plexus. Bank statements revealing deposits from 6 different neighbors over a period of 18 months. Mrs. Amelia, $450 for landscaping infractions. The Martinez family, $300 for violations related to holiday lights. Even the frail Mr. Peterson, $200 for non-compliance with fence height regulations. She's been stealing from people, I said in a whisper, my voice barely carrying over the sound of my shop fan. Actually taking their money. Over $2,300 in fraudulent fines, Mateo confirmed, his finger tracing the deposit entries. all deposited into a personal account, not a community fund. Her own personal checking account. The coffee in my cup had grown cold, but my blood was beginning to boil like an engine pushed to its limits. These are elderly individuals on fixed incomes, single mothers struggling to make ends meet. She has been robbing them. It gets worse, Mateo said, producing another document that caused my hands to clench into fists. Examine this payment history. Mrs. Amelia paid her fine during the same week her husband was hospitalized. She likely had to decide between buying groceries and evading Vivian's harassment. At that moment, a wave of rage washed over me. Not the fiery, explosive type, but the cold, methodical fury that arises from seeing genuine malevolence. The workshop became quiet, save for the ticking of Sarah's old wall clock and the faint sound of children playing in a neighborhood that had been systematically exploited. There is more, Mateo stated quietly, as if he were a physician delivering a grave prognosis. Jorge discovered something else. He presented a substantial folder bearing official state seals. The Riverside Meadows Homeowners Association was never legally established. The application was submitted in 2023 but was denied by the state due to incomplete documentation. Vivian never rectified the error. The realization hit me like a sudden, cold wave. Every fine she has collected is completely illegal. Grand theft, operating a fraudulent enterprise, mail fraud, if she mailed official-looking notices. Mateo's courthouse background was evident. She has been committing felonies daily for the past 18 months. But the discovery that truly broke me was on the final page. The original 1988 subdivision covenant, yellowed with time, but its text perfectly clear. Small-scale home businesses are encouraged to foster community economic growth, provided they uphold the neighborhood's character and safety standards. I began to laugh, then to cry, and then to laugh once more. Sarah's memory, our workshop, 15 years of serving the community, all of it had been legally protected from the day we moved in. Dex, Mateo's voice was gentle, filled with concern. She attempted to ruin everything Sarah and I created, I said, wiping tears from my eyes with the back of my hand. She intimidated our neighbors, stole from families who could barely make ends meet, and she was violating the law every single day while accusing me of infractions. The workshop seemed to smell of justice mixed with WD-40. What is our next step? Mateo inquired. I surveyed the evidence laid out on my workbench, proof of methodical theft, fraud, and harassment. Then, I looked at Sarah's gloves hanging on their hook, her seed packets arranged by season, her firm belief in doing what is right, even when it is difficult. Now, we ensure that every last cent is returned to the people she defrauded. And we make certain that Vivian Thornfield understands that some battles cannot be won with false power and stolen funds. My phone rang. It was Deputy Martinez. Mr. Brennan, we need to speak. The DA's office has just initiated a fraud investigation. My workshop unintentionally became a command center. It began on Monday afternoon when Mrs. Amelia appeared at my door, holding a crumpled envelope and looking as if she had been weeping. Mr. Brennan, I heard about the inquiry. I have something to tell you. The smell of motor oil and the autumn air pervaded the space as she sat on my old work stool, her hands trembling. I gave them $450 last month because my roses were growing too high over the fence line. I trimmed them, but they insisted I still had to pay the fine. Mrs. Amelia, you didn't owe them a single cent. They had no legal right to demand any money. I realize that now, she said in a whisper. But my husband was in the hospital, and I was frightened. When that official-looking letter arrived, I paid it. At that moment, Linda, Mrs. Amelia's daughter, who was home from law school for the week, arrived. She glanced at the fraudulent fine notice, and her face turned pale with fury. Mom, this is fraudulent. This is professional, systematic fraud. She looked at me. Mr. Brennan, how many others have paid these fake fines? At least 6 that we are aware of. Good heavens. Linda took out her phone. I am contacting my criminal law professor. This is a classic RICO case. 20 minutes later, Bertie Kowalski arrived. The reporter, in her 40s, had a history of covering municipal corruption for the county newspaper, and her knack for sniffing out a scandal was well known. She had learned about the DA's investigation from her sources and was eager for the story. Do you mind if I record this? She inquired, placing her phone on my workbench. This could be more significant than just your neighborhood. How much more significant? I asked, the familiar drone of my shop fan blending with the palpable tension in the room. I have been following similar complaints in 3 other communities. The same method, a fake HOA, targeted harassment, and property speculation. If this is what I suspect, Vivian Thornfield is conducting a regional operation. Mateo materialized in the doorway, drawn by the gathering. What's all the excitement about? We are organizing a revolution, I replied, only partially in jest. It's about time, he said with a smile, taking a seat in my extra chair. How can an old courthouse hand be of assistance? The strategy meeting that ensued was a combination of a legal debriefing, a support group, and a classic neighborhood organizing effort. The workshop buzzed with the sounds of fast typing, rustling papers, and the occasional swear word as we delved into the full extent of Vivian's offenses. Here is what we are up against, Linda stated, looking at her legal pad. Fraud, theft, harassment, mail fraud, and possibly federal civil rights violations if we can establish income-based discrimination. Oh, we can establish that, Bertie interjected, showing us her laptop screen. Look at the demographic analysis of the targeted properties versus the protected ones. Every single instance of harassment involves households with an annual income below $50,000. Mrs. Amelia let out a gasp. She was preying on poor people. Not poor, I clarified. Working-class individuals who couldn't afford to resist. Well, she chose the wrong working-class neighborhood, Mateo remarked with a sense of satisfaction. The sound of another vehicle pulling into my driveway broke our concentration. Through the window, I recognized a patrol car. Deputy Martinez had come unannounced, and she did not appear pleased. Mr. Brennan, we must talk, she said as she entered the workshop. Vivian Thornfield has just lodged a complaint, accusing you of running an illicit gambling operation in your garage. The room broke into laughter, the kind of bitter laughter that comes from watching someone dig their own grave. A gambling operation? I managed to say through my wheezing. I repair lawnmowers. I am aware of that. You are aware of that. The DA is aware of that. But she is now filing numerous complaints daily, attempting to obscure the issue before the fraud investigation moves forward. Desperate people resort to desperate measures, Linda noted. Which leads me to my reason for being here, Deputy Martinez went on. The DA wishes to move up the timeline. If you are willing to wear a recording device, we can get her to confess to the fraud charges directly. The workshop fell silent, except for the ticking of Sarah's old clock and the distant bark of a dog. All eyes were on me. You want me to act as bait? I want you to be the instrument of justice, Martinez answered. But only if you are comfortable with it. When documenting fraud, law enforcement often utilizes recorded conversations where legally permissible, as perpetrators frequently confess when faced with evidence. I looked at the faces of those around me. Mrs. Amelia, who had been coerced into paying money she didn't have, Linda, who had offered her legal skills to defend her mother, Bertie, who viewed this as part of a larger narrative about safeguarding vulnerable communities, and Mateo, who had observed bullies manipulating the system for decades. What would Sarah have done? I asked the group, gazing at her gardening gloves on their hook. She probably would have agreed to wear the wire 2 weeks ago, Mateo said with a smile. Then let's get this done, I declared. But I want all of you present when we bring her down. This is no longer just about me. The workshop echoed with the determined voices of people planning Vivian's downfall. For the first time in months, I felt a sense of impending victory. The wire felt like a cold serpent against my skin as I approached Vivian's residence on Wednesday morning. Deputy Martinez was positioned in an unmarked vehicle down the block, while Mateo feigned gardening, both prepared to step in should Vivian's desperation escalate into something dangerous. The morning atmosphere was thick with the scent of burning leaves and the metallic tang of my own fear. My hands were more stable than they had been in months, yet my heart pounded against the recording device affixed to my chest. I knocked on Vivian's door at precisely 9 a.m. She opened it, clad in a silk robe, with a look that implied she had both anticipated and feared this meeting. Dex, she said, her voice meticulously composed. This is a surprise. We need to have a conversation, Vivian, about the money, the falsehoods, and what comes next. Her eyes darted with a mix of apprehension and strategic thought. She moved to let me in, and I detected the fragrance of costly coffee blended with something more acrid, the scent of someone who had started drinking early. The house had the feel of a museum display. Suburban perfection, circa 2024. Everything was flawlessly arranged, devoid of any signs of life, completely artificial. "Coffee?" she asked, but her hand quivered slightly as she indicated the kitchen. "I'm fine. Let's get straight to the point, Vivian. I am aware of the money you have been stealing." She sank into an armchair with rehearsed elegance, but I could discern the tightness in her shoulders. "I have no idea what you are referring to. Mrs. Amelia's $450. The Martinez family's $300. Peterson's $200. Shall I continue?" Her composure began to fracture like aged paint. Those were valid fines for covenant infractions. From an HOA that was never legally established, using power you never possessed. The silence between us was punctuated only by the hum of her air purifier and the faint sound of Harold's car starting in the driveway. He was heading to work early, likely to sidestep this encounter. "You have been doing your research," she finally remarked. "Not nearly as much research as you have been conducting. Property speculation, methodical harassment, document forgery. In how many other neighborhoods have you executed this scheme?" She rose suddenly and went to the window, gazing out at the neighborhood she had sought to dominate. "You have no concept of what I have been trying to achieve here. Please, enlighten me." This neighborhood was in decline. Property values were flat. Undesirable elements were diminishing standards. Someone needed to intervene. Undesirable elements. Like working families? Like individuals who fail to uphold proper standards? Who conduct businesses from their homes? Who park commercial vehicles in residential zones? She faced me again, her facade finally crumbling. "Like you. So, you opted to steal from people to finance your cleanup initiative." "I did not steal anything." Her voice rose, sharp and frantic. "I collected fees for legitimate violations. Illicit fees from a non-existent organization for violations that were never committed." The sound of her coffee machine gurgling in the kitchen broke the silence. She was cornered, and we were both aware of it. "What is it that you want?" she inquired, her voice barely a whisper. "I want you to give back every cent you took. Disband your fraudulent HOA. Leave this neighborhood in peace. And if I say no, then you will be explaining your property speculation activities to a federal judge." She let out a laugh, but it had the sound of shattering glass. "A federal judge? That's absurd. Vivian, you have been systematically singling out individuals based on their income. That falls into the category of civil rights violations. Combine that with the mail fraud, the document forgery, and the organized nature of the operation." I took out my phone and displayed a text from Linda. "The FBI field office has confirmed they are examining the case for federal prosecution." The color drained from her face as if a plug had been pulled. That's not possible. You targeted elderly people on fixed incomes, single mothers, and veterans. You used official-looking documents to pressure people into paying money they didn't have. Did you honestly believe there would be no repercussions?" She sank back into her chair, but instead of collapsing, a more sinister expression appeared on her face. "Do you know what your problem is, Dex? You see yourself as some kind of hero, but you're just a grease monkey who can't come to terms with the fact that the world has progressed. Perhaps, but I am a grease monkey who is on the verge of sending you to prison. You are unable to prove anything. I don't need to prove a thing. Mrs. Amelia's bank statements are proof. The Martinez family's canceled checks are proof. Your own deposit slips are proof." At that moment, she smiled, a cold, calculating look that sent a shiver down my spine. "Do you know what I did this morning, Dex? I contacted the state contractors licensing board. Were you aware that running a repair business without the proper license is a misdemeanor, resulting in automatic business closure?" My stomach lurched. "What are you talking about?" "I mean, I've saved the best for last. By tomorrow morning, your quaint little shop will be closed for good, and there is absolutely nothing you can do about it." The wire against my chest suddenly felt like a lifeline rather than a liability. She had just threatened me on a recording, confirming that the harassment was ongoing and deliberate. "Vivian, you have 24 hours to return every cent you stole and dissolve your fraudulent HOA. If you fail to do so, federal charges will be filed tomorrow morning." "We will see about that," she retorted, her voice laced with venom. As I departed, I could hear her on the phone. "Harold, we need to speak now." The conflict had only just begun. Vivian's retaliation was like a sledgehammer to the chest. On Thursday morning, I discovered my workshop door sealed with an official state closure notice. The bright yellow tape stretched across the entrance resembled crime scene barriers. Business operations suspended pending investigation of unlicensed contractor activities. I read aloud, my voice trembling. The familiar scent of motor oil and sawdust seemed like a funeral rite. Everything I had built, everything that tied me to Sarah, was suddenly off limits. My phone was already ringing. Mr. Brennan, this is Janet Miller from the State Contractors Licensing Board. We have received serious complaints regarding unlicensed electrical and mechanical work. On the basis of what proof? An anonymous tip containing detailed accusations. The consequences are significant. Fines up to $10,000 and permanent closure of your business. We must arrange an immediate compliance inspection. I hung up and quickly called Linda, my hands shaking as I dialed. They are attempting to ruin my business. On what grounds? Unlicensed contractor work. But I have been operating with a home occupation permit for 15 years. Small engine repair doesn't necessitate a contractor's license. Remain calm, Linda advised, though I could sense the concern in her voice. I will look into the regulations. In the meantime, do not touch anything in the workshop. Any work you perform now could be used against you. The irony was a bitter taste in my mouth. Vivian had turned the very bureaucratic system she had been exploiting against me, and now I was ensnared by it. That afternoon, Mateo came to my door with news that made my stomach sink. Dex, someone defaced Mrs. Amelia's house last night. They spray-painted Traitor across her garage door in red paint. Was there any other damage? The tires on the Martinez family's car were slashed, all 4 of them, and someone poured sugar into Peterson's gas tank. The escalation was precise and intentional. Vivian was systematically intimidating everyone who had challenged her. Any witnesses? Mrs. Patterson observed a dark SUV driving through the neighborhood around 2 a.m. The license plates were not visible, but the driver was wearing a baseball cap and sunglasses. I dedicated the afternoon to documenting every detail while attempting to get in touch with Deputy Martinez. The workshop stood deserted behind its yellow tape, tools collecting dust, and Sarah's gardening gloves hanging undisturbed on their hook. The call that changed the course of events came from Bertie Kowalski at 6 p.m. Dex, I've been looking into Vivian's history. What I discovered will shock you. What kind of history? The kind that clarifies why she is so adept at this. Vivian Thornfield is not merely a property speculator. She is a professional predator. This is her 4th neighborhood in 10 years. The documents Bertie had found read like a criminal investigation file. Portland, Oregon, 2015 to 2017. 12 families intimidated into selling their homes at prices below market value. Phoenix, Arizona, 2018 to 2020. 3 families forced out through methodical harassment. Boise, Idaho, 2021 to 2023. An FBI investigation was initiated but subsequently closed due to a lack of evidence. She has been refining this method for a decade, Bertie went on. Property manipulation, harassment campaigns, bureaucratic warfare. She even maintains a network of contractors who fabricate issues that she can then discover and penalize. Professional troublemakers. Precisely. The lawsuit in Phoenix refers to hired vandals, fraudulent noise complaints, and even sabotaged utilities. Vivian has been utilizing these tactics for years. This explained the calculated nature of the attacks and the systematic harassment. This was not simply a neighborhood disagreement. It was organized crime masquerading as community enhancement. My phone buzzed with a text from an unlisted number. Last warning. Cease the investigation, or everyone will suffer the consequences. I immediately contacted Deputy Martinez. I have just received a threatening text message. From whom? An unknown number. But the timing is hardly a coincidence. Mr. Brennan, I require you to come in at once. We have had a significant development in the case. The drive to the sheriff's office felt as if I were navigating through hostile territory. My neighborhood, the place where Sarah and I had established our life, where I had assisted neighbors for 15 years, was now being besieged by someone who viewed it as nothing more than a financial opportunity. At the sheriff's office, Deputy Martinez shared news that completely altered the situation. The DA's office conducted a search of the Thornfield residence this morning. What we discovered extends far beyond local fraud. What kind of evidence? files detailing targeted neighborhoods in 4 different states, financial documents revealing systematic property manipulation, and even contracts with community improvement consultants, professional harassment services. The extent of it was overwhelming. Vivian had not only been targeting my neighborhood, she had been managing a regional enterprise that dismantled communities for financial gain. Professional property manipulation frequently involves networks of contractors and consultants, which can lead to federal RICO charges for organized criminal activities. What is the next step? Now, we ensure she never repeats this in another neighborhood. But Dex, you must be aware that cornered predators are extremely dangerous. She is facing federal charges, which makes her behavior unpredictable. As if our conversation had summoned him, my phone rang. Harold's number appeared on the screen. Dex. Harold's voice was hoarse with fatigue and fear. You must halt the investigation. She's not thinking rationally anymore. Harold, what is happening? She has been drinking, talking about final solutions. She keeps insisting that if she can't have the neighborhood, no one can. What does that imply? It implies that I am afraid, Dex. Genuinely afraid. She has gasoline in the garage, and she keeps talking about cleaning up the neighborhood for good. The emergency city council meeting was at capacity by 6 p.m., but the main event began when Vivian Thornfield entered as if she owned the place. She was dressed in a Navy power suit and moved with the assurance of someone who was confident she could talk her way out of federal prosecution. The council chambers were filled with the smell of nervous perspiration and righteous indignation. Mrs. Amelia was seated in the front row, her daughter Linda ready with a substantial folder of documents. Mateo had taken up a strategic position near the rear, his courthouse savvy as sharp as ever. Bertie Kowalski moved through the room with her recorder, capturing every hushed exchange for what she knew would be a front-page story. Harold followed his wife, appearing like a man who had spent the past week witnessing the dissolution of his marriage. When our eyes met across the room, I saw a mix of apology and sheer panic in his. Ladies and gentlemen, Mayor Rodriguez announced, bringing the meeting to order. We are convened to discuss serious accusations concerning homeowner association practices in Riverside Meadows. Mr. Mayor, Vivian declared, standing with dramatic composure, I am here to protect our homeowners association from a deliberate campaign of harassment by certain residents who are unwilling to be held accountable. A ripple of murmurs, like distant thunder, spread through the crowded room. She was still on the offensive, attempting to shape the story. The accusations are without merit, she went on, opening her briefcase with polished ease. What you are observing is a desperate move by code offenders to evade the repercussions of their actions. Mrs. Thornfield, Mayor Rodriguez cut in, I must inform you that the FBI has provided this council with their initial findings. Perhaps you would like to respond to those in particular. For the first time, Vivian's composure wavered. I am not aware of any federal interest in what ought to be a local zoning issue. At that moment, Linda rose, her paralegal training evident in her decisive actions. Your Honor, I wish to submit evidence of methodical fraud that extends across multiple states. She turned on the room's projector, and suddenly, the wall was filled with bank statements, property deeds, and a timeline that laid out the full extent of Vivian's offenses in stark detail. Phoenix, Arizona, 23 families displaced by fraudulent HOA actions. Boise, Idaho, 31 families targeted with fabricated violations. Portland, Oregon, 18 families intimidated into selling their homes at prices below market value. The room was filled with gasps and angry murmurs. Vivian's face turned as pale as courthouse stone. This is fabricated evidence, she exclaimed, a concerted attack by individuals who what? Mrs. Amelia's voice sliced through the commotion like a sharp knife. She rose slowly, her 70-year-old body somehow taking command of the room. Individuals who lacked the means to resist? People like me, who handed you $450 while my husband was on his deathbed. Mrs. Amelia, you failed to comply with clearly defined regulations. Regulations that did not exist. Linda cut in, advancing to the next slide. Your HOA was never legally established. Every fine you imposed was an act of theft. The crowd was now on its feet, their voices joining in a chorus of outrage. But Vivian was not done. Do you want the truth? She yelled over the uproar, her professional demeanor finally breaking. This neighborhood was a disgrace. Dilapidated houses, commercial vehicles, people with no understanding of property values. Property values? I stood up, my voice rising above the crowd. Are you referring to the values that arise from neighbors supporting one another? From Mrs. Amelia's roses that brought joy to everyone? From Peterson's bicycle repairs that ensured children's safety? Certainly not on TV, Vivian snarled, pointing a finger directly at me. Getting rid of grease monkeys who believe they can operate businesses in residential areas. Eliminating people who do not fit into a quality community. The room fell into a dead silence. Even the cameras stopped flashing. She had just exposed her true motives in front of 300 people. You know what, Vivian? I said, my voice as steady as a rock. You are entirely correct. I am a grease monkey. I make my living by fixing broken things. I looked around the room at the faces of my neighbors, people who had united to defend their homes. But here is what I have come to understand. Some things are so shattered they cannot be repaired. They must be removed entirely. I took out my phone and projected a text message onto the screen. Like this message you sent me this morning. I will burn down your workshop before I let you win. The room erupted. Cameras flashed. Vivian's face went from white to red to purple. That's not. I never. Mrs. Thornfield, Deputy Martinez said, stepping forward with handcuffs. You are under arrest for fraud, theft, conspiracy, and making terroristic threats. As the handcuffs clicked shut, Vivian made one final, desperate move. Harold, tell them. Tell them about the business plan. Harold looked at his wife, then at the crowd, and finally at me. The business plan where you targeted working-class families to steal their homes. That business plan. The silence that ensued was profound. Harold had just dealt the decisive blow. The only thing I regret, I remarked as she was escorted out, is not recognizing sooner that the greatest danger to our neighborhood was someone who never grasped what made it worth defending. The crowd burst into applause that felt like justice itself. 6 months later, I was in my workshop on a brisk Saturday morning, taking in the familiar smell of motor oil blended with something I hadn't smelled in a long time. The sweet fragrance of Sarah's heirloom tomatoes flourishing in the new community garden, visible from my window. The yellow tape was gone, replaced by a hand-painted sign that declared, Brennan's Repair, fixing what matters since 2009. Underneath, in smaller print, it read, a community-supported business. Mrs. Amelia came to my door with a plate of cookies and a smile that had been absent for 18 months. Dex, see what arrived in the mail. She presented a check for $1,350. Triple damages from Vivian's restitution fund. I am donating half to the neighborhood scholarship fund. My granddaughter is inspired to study community law because of what we achieved here. The monetary win was gratifying, but seeing our neighborhood change from a place of anxiety into a symbol of hope was invaluable. Mateo ambled over with the Sunday paper, his smile as broad as a Texas highway. Front page once more, he declared. Birdie's follow-up article, The Riverside Meadows Model, How One Neighborhood's Triumph Ignited a National Movement. The piece described how our struggle had motivated similar efforts in 43 communities across 12 states. The Brennan Protocol, document everything, form alliances, know your rights, had become a guide for combating property predators. We have visitors coming next week, Mateo added. A group from a neighborhood in Colorado. They want to see how we managed it. The workshop door swung open, and Deputy Martinez, now Captain Martinez following her promotion for exceptional community policing, entered. I hope I'm not interrupting. I wanted to bring you some news personally. She gave me an official-looking paper. The FBI task force, which your case helped to create, has dismantled 14 property manipulation operations in 6 states. Over 300 families have retained their homes because of what you initiated here. My hand trembled slightly as I held the letter. 300 families. 300 communities that would not have to endure what we had. There's more, she went on. The Department of Justice is creating a national registry to monitor property predators. They are naming it the Thornfield Registry to stop individuals like Vivian from moving between neighborhoods. The sound of children's laughter floated in through the workshop windows. The Martinez kids playing in their yard without worry, the Amelia grandchildren visiting for the weekend. The typical sounds of a neighborhood that had learned how to defend itself. The dedication for the community garden is next month, Mrs. Amelia said quietly. The Sarah Brennan Memorial Garden. We've planted her favorite roses right at the entrance. I glanced through the window at the empty lot where Vivian had intended to construct her oversized house. In its place were raised garden beds providing food for families in need, a playground constructed by volunteers offering a safe play area for children, and a small pavilion that hosted weekend farmers markets and community gatherings. Do you know what the best part is? I asked, looking at the faces of friends who had become like family through our shared ordeal. Sarah would have adored this. She always used to say, the best way to honor someone's memory is to make the world a little better than you found it. The annual Riverside Meadows Freedom Festival was scheduled for the next day, a celebration that had evolved from a modest block party into a significant regional gathering. This year's theme was strength through unity, and the entire street was adorned with homemade signs that celebrated the diversity that defined our strength. Local news teams would be present, along with delegates from the 43 communities that were using our approach to fight their own battles. What began as one man's refusal to be intimidated had blossomed into a movement. So what comes next? Mateo inquired. Next, we continue living, I replied. We continue to support our neighbors. We continue to advocate for communities where working families can prosper. I looked around the workshop that had been at the heart of this entire conflict, the place where fear had been converted into courage, where loneliness had given way to community, and where one neighborhood's suffering had become a source of inspiration for a nation. And we continue to share our story, because somewhere out there, another Vivian is singling out another neighborhood. And when she does, the people there will know they are not on their own. As the sun dipped below the horizon over Riverside Meadows, I could hear the sounds of a neighborhood at peace, but also a neighborhood prepared to stand up for others who were still facing their own struggles.